It's hard to imagine now. We see everything. We have seen it all. But you have to go back in time. Not that far back, really. To the 1950s. A time when things were different. A time when a single television performance could shake the entire country. And it did. A young man walked onto a stage, and by the time he walked off, nothing was the same. The phones in the television studio started ringing. They didn't stop. Letters poured in for weeks. People were furious. They were disgusted. They were also thrilled. But the angry voices were the loudest. They were the ones the network executives heard. What did they see? What could possibly cause such an uproar? It wasn't what he said. It wasn't even the lyrics of the song. It was him. It was how he moved. It was the energy coming out of him, pouring through the screen and into living rooms from New York to California. It was raw, and it was something America had never invited into its home before. And after that night, they tried to make sure they never would again. They pointed the cameras differently. They made new rules. They essentially banned him, or at least the part of him that mattered, from the neck down. All because of one performance, one song. To understand the explosion, you have to understand the silence that came before it. The America of the mid-1950s was a nation holding its breath. The war was over. The economy was booming. People were moving to the suburbs, buying new cars, and starting families. There was a script: you graduate, you get a job, you get married, you buy a house with a white picket fence. Conformity was the goal. It was safe, it was comfortable. The Cold War was humming in the background, a low-grade fear that made everyone cling to the familiar. Don't rock the boat, don't stand out, just fit in. And the culture reflected. It was relentlessly pleasant. The music on the radio was smooth and predictable. Singers like Perry Como and Patti Page were the biggest stars. They stood still when they sang. They smiled. Their songs were about puppy dogs in the window or catching a falling star and putting it in your pocket. It was nice, it was wholesome, it was music for your parents. Television was the same. It was brand new and finding its footing, but it knew what its job was. Its job was to sell products and present a clean, happy version of American life. Shows like Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver showed families where every problem could be solved with a quiet chat in the study before dinner. Everything was orderly. Everything was polite. There was another America, of course. There always is. There was a restless energy under the surface. The kids, the first generation to be called teenagers, were bored. They didn't have a war to fight. They had allowances, they had cars, they had a feeling that this clean, perfect world they were being shown wasn't the whole story. They were looking for something of their own. Something with a beat. And in the South, in the segregated world of juke joints and late-night radio shows, that beat was already there. It was in the rhythm and blues music played by black artists. It was raw and emotional. It was about real life, about struggle and desire. It was music you could feel in your bone. It was also in the hillbilly and country music played on dusty back porches. Music full of heartbreak and defiance. These worlds rarely mixed. They were kept apart by law and by custom. But music doesn't care about rules. It travels on the airwaves, and a poor kid in Memphis, Tennessee was listening to all of it. He was soaking it all in. The gospel he heard in church. The country he heard on the Grand Ole Opry. The blues he heard on Beale Street. He didn't see the lines between them, he just heard the feeling. His name was Elvis Presley. When he first walked into Sun Records, a small studio in Memphis, the owner, Sam Phillips, didn't know what to make of him. He was a truck driver, he was shy, he sang ballads, but then during a break he started messing around. He picked up his guitar and started playing an old blues song, but he played it fast. He played it like a country song, he bounced around, he sang with an energy that was part gospel fire, part back alley swagger. Sam Phillips heard it. He knew what it was. It was the sound everyone was waiting for, even if they didn't know it yet. His first records were regional hits, but it was the live shows where the legend began. He didn't just stand there and sing, he couldn't. The music moved through him. His leg would start shaking uncontrollably at first. He'd grab the microphone stand and lean back, closing his eyes. He'd snarl. He'd smile. He moved his hips. In the sanitized world of 1955, this was dynamite. The girls in the audience would scream. Not just clap. They would scream until they were hoarse. They would cry. They would rush the stage. The boys would watch him, trying to copy his hair, his clothes, his attitude. The parents and the preachers saw something else. They saw danger, they saw rebellion, they saw sex, and they were terrified. Television was the next logical step. It was the ultimate way to reach the entire country at once. His manager, a shrewd promoter named Colonel Tom Parker, knew this. He booked Elvis on a popular variety show hosted by the Dorsey brothers. It was his national debut. He came out, a bundle of nervous energy, and sang. The camera stayed on him. It caught the leg shake, it caught the sneer, the reaction was immediate, the kids loved it. The network got calls. Some were good, many were bad, a seed of controversy was planted. But the real turning point came a few months later on the Milton Berle Show. Milton Berle was Mr. Television, a huge star. Elvis was booked for a second appearance. He decided to sing a new song, Hound Dog. But he didn't just sing it, he performed it. For the final part of the song, he slowed the tempo way down. He got sultry. He moved his body in a way that television had never shown before. He gyrated. He thrust his hips. It was a deliberate, provocative performance. He was teasing the audience and he was teasing the censors. The next day, the press exploded. The reviews were vicious. A critic for the New York Times called him an unutterable bore and described his performance as a caterwauling, sideburns picker of the guitar. Another paper called him Elvis the Pelvis and said his act was a striptease with clothes on. The moral guardians of America went on high alert. This wasn't just music anymore. This was a threat to decency. This was the corruption of youth broadcast directly into their living rooms. The controversy was so intense that the next television host who booked him felt he had to do something. Steve Allen, who had a competing variety show, wanted the ratings Elvis could bring, but he also wanted to defuse the situation. He decided to humiliate him. He presented a new Elvis. He had him come out dressed in a full tuxedo with white gloves and tails. And he made him sing Hound Dog to a real-life basset hound who was sitting on a stool wearing a top hat. Though Elvis was a good sport, he did it, he sang to the dog, he was polite and charming, but he hated it. He felt like he had sold out. He vowed never to let them tame him again. The establishment thought they had won. They had put the wild animal in a cage and made him do a trick. They were wrong. All they did was make him more determined, and it made his fans love him even more. They saw him being made fun of by the old guard, and it made him one of... By now, there was one show left to conquer. The biggest show of them all, the Ed Sullivan Show. Ed Sullivan was the kingmaker of television. An appearance on his Sunday night show could make you a superstar overnight. But Sullivan was a traditionalist. He was a family man. After the Milton Berle fiasco, he publicly declared that Elvis was not my cup of tea, and that he would never have him on his show. He considered him vulgar, unfit for the Sullivan stage. But Colonel Parker was persistent, and Ed Sullivan was a businessman. He saw the ratings Elvis got for his competitors. He saw the headlines. He saw the records selling in the millions. He couldn't ignore the biggest star in the country. He finally gave in. He booked Elvis for 3 appearances, for the then unheard-of sum of $50,000. The first appearance was in September 1956. As fate would have it, Sullivan himself was in the hospital recovering from a car accident. The British actor Charles Laughton filled in as host. The studio was buzzing. The Colonel had negotiated with the producers. They were nervous. They agreed to shoot Elvis from the waist up for one of his songs. But for the others, they showed him full body. He sang Don't Be Cruel and Love Me Tender. He was electric. The audience in the studio went wild. The television audience was the largest in history up to that point. Over 60 million people watched. That was more than 80% of the entire television audience. It was a cultural event on a scale that is impossible to comprehend today. Ed Sullivan saw the numbers from his hospital bed. He knew he had made the right decision. He sent Elvis a telegram to Elvis Presley and the Colonel. 20 years of experience. I have never had a greater night. The second appearance was set for October. This time, Ed Sullivan would be there. He was the host. He would introduce the boy he once swore he never booked. The pressure was immense. The whole country was watching to see what would happen. Would he be tame? Would he be wild? When Elvis flew to New York for the show, he was confident. He was ready. He came out and sang a few songs. He was full of energy, but he was holding back a little. He knew Sullivan was watching from the wings. He knew the world was watching. He sang Don't Be Cruel again. He sang Love Me Tender. The girls screamed. Sullivan seemed pleased. It was all going smoothly. Maybe the controversy was over. Maybe Elvis had learned his lesson. But then it was time for his final number of the night. It was a fast one, a rock and roll song, pure and simple. It was a cover of a Little Richard tune. The music started a driving, frantic beat, and Elvis exploded. All the pent-up energy from the Steve Allen Show, all the frustration with the critics, all the raw power he had inside him, it all came out. He wasn't holding back anymore. This was the real him. He grabbed the microphone. He danced across the stage. He kicked his legs high in the air. He spun. He dropped to his knees. He shook his hips with an intensity that made the Milton Berle performance look like a warm-up. He was a blur of motion. The camera operator struggled to keep him in the frame. The director in the control room was probably having a heart attack. This was exactly what the critics had warned about. This was the wild man uncaged on the most respected stage in America. The audience in the studio was in a frenzy. Their screams were so loud they practically drowned out the music. He finished the song, sweating, breathing hard, a triumphant smirk on his face. He had done it, he had shown them all, and the backlash was immediate. The phones at CBS lit up. The protesters organized, church groups wrote letters condemning the show, the network, and Ed Sullivan for allowing this Lou and Vigius display into their home. It was one thing for this kind of behavior to happen on a rowdy teen show, but this was Ed Sullivan. This was Sunday night. This was family time. He had crossed a line. Ed Sullivan was in a tough spot. The ratings were astronomical, but the moral outrage was real. He had one more show with Elvis on the contract. He couldn't cancel it, but he couldn't have a repeat of that performance. He needed to control it. He needed to find a way to present the singer without presenting the sin. And so he and his producers made a decision. A decision that would become one of the most famous moments in television history. For Elvis's third and final appearance on the show in January 1957, the orders were clear. The cameras were to film him only from the waist up. No dancing legs, no shaking hips. No full body shots. They would show his face, they would show him playing the guitar, but they would not show the movements that had caused all the trouble. They were effectively cutting him in half. They were banning the pelvis from television. Elvis came out and did his job. He sang his heart out. He knew about the camera rule. He even joked about it. He was still magnetic, he was still Elvis, but something was missing. The broadcast felt neutered, constrained. At the end of the night, Ed Sullivan walked onto the stage and put his arm around Elvis. He looked directly into the camera and told America, "This is a real decent, fine boy. We've never had a pleasanter experience on our show with a big name than we've had with you." It was Sullivan's way of putting his stamp of approval on him, of telling the critics to back off. But the damage was done. The censorship had happened. It didn't hurt Elvis's career. In fact, it probably helped. Being banned from the waist down made him even more of a hero to his young fans. It proved he was dangerous. It proved he was a rebel. The old folks didn't get it, and that was the whole point. He was theirs, not their parents. That single performance, that explosion of energy at the end of his second appearance, was the final straw. It was the moment that forced the hand of the establishment. It wasn't just about the song itself. It was about what he did during the song. It was the physical manifestation of rock and roll, a force that could not be contained by a small screen or by the rules of 1950s decorum. They could aim the cameras higher, but they couldn't stop the revolution he had started. The song that caused all the chaos, the one that got Elvis Presley censored on national television and cemented his status as a cultural outlaw, was Ready Teddy.